Tell you something, being a man ain't no joke.
Toxic masculinity.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sex.
Hello, fellas, and welcome back to A Christian Male Perspective. Today I wanted to deviate a little bit from our Classic Man series. As you remember, one of our previous videos was talking about being a classic man, being confident, being a leader, being assertive, having self-control, being sober, being intelligent and competitive. We'll get back to that series here in just a bit. But today I want to talk about something that I saw in a few videos that came up in my feed today, talking about men and men's life. And this was the idea of a 50-50 relationship. Now, I have to admit this was something a little new to me. So when I saw a couple of videos and kind of read about it a little bit, basically what it seems to be getting at is men are to be 50% of the providers and women are to be 50% of the providers. So in that sense, this kind of concept of equality where men do half of everything and women do half of everything. In a lot of ways, they were talking primarily about finances, but they did seem to talk a little bit about breaching into like childcare, house duties, so forth and so on. Now, I would like to break this up into several different aspects. I think there's a lot to be broken down here and nuances to talk about. So first, let's talk about being single, a single Christian man, and then let's talk about being a married Christian man. So first, on the single Christian man side. And we'll talk about this when we talk a little bit more about men and dating or courting, that's what we used to call it back in my days, and what it means for men to court a lady. But in general, what I teach my son and what I teach all the young men that I mentor is that men, particularly let's say the first date, right? First date, men, you pay. In the same way, when I teach my daughter to expect a man to be able to pay to provide. That's something that was taught for me, was taught, my uncles, I've seen it, and it's something that I think works, and I'll get to that here in just a second on why that is. But I think it sets a good precedent for the type of man that you're planning to be if this relationship continues beyond dating. And that's why I think it's important on your first date that the man should be able to provide for that. Now, here's a mistake I see a lot of young men make and what I definitely advise against. Your first date should not be at a Maestro's or a Ruth Chris, right? Especially if you do not know the young lady and you're not very familiar with her. You may have just met with her and spoke to her one or two times. There seems to be some chemistry and some attraction there. Don't make your first date $300-400. You're putting a huge investment in something that frankly you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Right? You're not, and I say this, being a man of a little older, different than now today's generation, your first priority on your first date should not be to flex, to show her how much you can or cannot do. Your date should match your wage, so to speak. So most especially young guys, you're just starting off your career, or if you're in college even, you may have a part-time job. You going to Ruth Chris is not realistic, right? It's not realistic. I'm not saying go to Burger King, right? You may try Chili's or Applebee's, or actually something that I do recommend especially for your first date, try something like coffee. Go out, get some coffee, or make a picnic and go out on a picnic together. So there's low investment on both sides, you and the lady, and it gives you guys space to try to learn each other a little bit better, and you're not focusing on this that's going to hurt your wallet. You're worried about paying your rent or your car insurance, next week. Whatever the case may be. But I go back to the subject, I do believe men are to be the providers. Now, as you guys' relationship progress further along and you start getting more serious and you're saying, hey, I may see a life and I might see the rest of my life, with this young lady, I always recommend that you start talking once it gets to that point when you're thinking about seriously considering this lady to be your wife, you sit down and you have pre-marriage counseling. And one aspect of that pre-marriage counseling is finances and how you guys' finances should be once you guys get married. Because you have been living two separate independent lives. And once you do become married, now two become one. In the dating aspect, while you guys are still dating, before you get to that point, I I do not see anything wrong with a guy providing, and I kind of expect a guy to provide most of the dates. Now, all the dates, again, don't have to be anything expensive, but, you know, I have no issue with the guy providing most of the day. If the young lady said, you know what, I want to plan this date, I got you. Guys, don't be too proud to let her do that. Let her, if this is a two-way street, which it should be, then yes, she should have the opportunity to show her affection, to show her appreciation for who and what you are and what you mean in a relationship. So if a young lady offers to, you know, I want to plan this day's date, you don't have to worry about anything, I got it. Dudes, let her do that. Let her do that. Give her opportunity and give her space to be able to show their appreciation. But in general, I think that guys should be the primary provider in a dating. And here's why. Because guys, you should be seeking a wife, someone that you are going to be investing your time, money, and resources into, right? So as a way of doing that, you're trying to evaluate, is this someone that I can see long term with? And one way you can tell if something's important, if it's something that you think is valuable to you, you'll put your time and your money towards that. So when it comes to the dating, in general, I think the guys provide most of the day. Again, all the dates do not have to be, you know, going out to a 4 or 5 star Michelin restaurant. You can vary it up, and I think most ladies appreciate that variation. And again, if she wants to be able to, you know, plan dates, guys, let her go for it. Give her the opportunity to be able to do that. Now, let's switch over to the marriage side. Me and my wife, we talk to different couples about financing, about marriage in general, but financing in particular. And one of the things that we've seen is that people tend to fall on one or two spectrums. You have those where they keep, the husband and the wife keep their money separate, and they have assigned bills, if you will. He pays for this, she pays for this, he pays for this, and that's generally how they work out. And I've seen mixed results with that, to be frankly honest. More failures than success, if I was to really go kind of sit back and look at it. And generally it stems around to, well, what's happening with the rest of the money? That's kind of the general question that's being asked. Well, you know, you're paying for this, I'm paying for this. What else are you doing with the rest of your money? Now, on the other side, which is something that my wife and I practice, we have a joint account. And I'll caveat that. We have a primary joint account where money goes into. And this is what me and my wife budget out of. We pay for all our bills, everything related to the family comes out of this joint account. And even things that she needs or things that I need come out of this joint account. Like I needed to purchase this microphone, came out of our joint account. However, my wife and I both have personal accounts. And the way that we do it, and what I've seen seems to be very successful in many marriages, is whatever money, the money goes into the whole pot, and we budget out of that pot. One of the line items in that budget is she gets an allowance and I get an allowance. That allowance is what we can use to do for whatever we want. For her, if my wife is big into making shirts now, a shirt made by my wife. So when she wants to go and buy new stencils and images and things, she uses her money, she goes and does that. For me, you might have guessed, I'm a gamer. I like games. So I use my money to go and buy games. Now, depending on what it is, personally, I may not be able to buy what I want within a month. So I have to be disciplined. If there's something that I really want and I can't get it within my allowance for that month, I have to save up and then go get it. Now, what that means is that once we spend our money for that month, it's gone. And because I get paid once a month and I'm the primary provider for our family, once it's gone unless we get side hustles. And we'll talk about that when we start talking about me and providing more down the road. But that's generally, I've seen it work. So with our family, which I think, and I'll tell you a little bit of story about this. I provide most of the finances. I take care of the house When it comes to the mortgage, comes to food, comes to utilities, comes to cars, insurance, that falls on me. And this was something that I learned from, I was raised by my grandfather. I was not raised by my father. That was a long situation. I may tell that story at some point. But I was raised by my grandfather. And my grandfather was the primary breadwinner for my family. He provided the most of the money. Now, my grandmother, she had a little side job as a maid servant. Again, this was a while back. And she made a little bit, but not much. So my grandfather was the primary breadwinner. And I saw him go out, and I saw this man work really hard. I saw this man getting up at 6:30 every morning. Even to the day he died, he was about 80 when he passed away. He was still getting up at 6:30, going out and working 12 hours a day, Monday through Saturday. I saw this, and that is what inspired me with my work ethic and being able to go out and be the primary provider for my family once I got one. So yes, I encourage men to be that provider, to strive to be the 100%er, for lack of a better term, not a 50%er. I encourage men to be that 100%er, to be able to provide 100% of what your family needs. Now, you have to be willing to get with a partner who's willing to understand where you are and what you can provide. A man who is making $70,000 a year, very respectable salary, very respectable income per year, versus a man who's making $400,000 a year, they're going to be able to provide two different things. Both can provide a comfortable living, but there's going to be different scales. And your partner that you're with, your wife that you're with, has to understand where you are and to be able to work within that budget that you're providing. Now, if she's able, if you guys are in a situation where she is able to bring something in addition to that, great. Bring it into the pool. You know, give each other your allowances, what you agree makes sense for that allowance, and be able to build with that nest egg that you have there, be able to work it out through each month to do that. But I definitely believe a man should be the primary provider. And one of the reasons why I say that is I've seen many couples where they were both man and woman working, and it started off great, especially in their early to mid 20s. And that was not a big deal. But many women, as they started getting towards that 30 age, they start thinking about having children. And this is not for every case, I'm not going to say that. But for many cases, when a woman starts thinking about having kids and bringing children and bringing another life into this world, they want to be able to dedicate a significant portion of time to make sure that life is growing healthily. In doing that, that other income that she's providing is not going to be available. So when you start off, let's give easy numbers, $50,000 and $50,000, you're working up $100,000 yearly income. Then all of a sudden, that drops off, and you only have this 50 now to work with. That's a huge life change, guys. Huge life change. So when you're planning and living and used to a lifestyle of 100, and now they got to drop off to 50, even for like 6 months, that can be a definite shock to the relationship. It definitely can shock the core a little bit if it's not properly planned for. So again, guys, I encourage you, strive to be 100%er. Strive to be 100%er. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to try to strive to be a millionaire, by no means. But strive to be 100% in that your relationship that you're with, especially with the spouse, that you're bringing, that you guys are able to live off whatever you're bringing primarily to the table. If she brings anything additional, let that be additional income. That could be great for throwing it into the retirement and building up that nest egg, for future down the road. If you can live primarily and both be content off of what you just make, then her salary can either knock down all your debt. We'll talk about debt later on. If there is debt that's in the marriage that's left, can kill that debt and then be there to build up that nest egg. Or if you have no debt, it can just go straight to the nest egg and start building that generational wealth, which is something that we should definitely be focused on. And we'll talk about it a little bit later on. All right, so guys, that's my overall opinion. I'm not a 50%er. I'm not a 50-50 guy. You're going to see in the thumb that you saw by the thumb, I am not a 50-50 50 guy. I am 100%er. I believe men should strive to be the 100%, and they should be able to strive to find people, to find a lady, a wife that can work with them with what they're providing, and take that and multiply that and make it stretch and move beyond what it is. So fellas, what does the Word of God says about this? Well, if you look in 1 Timothy 5 and 8, it says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, again, when you're single, your household is primarily you, right? I have a son who got a partner. His primary household at that point became him and what he was living at. But it does say take care of your relatives as well. So man, if you are single, what I believe is that this means that if your mom or your sister, your brother are in need, and you're able to provide it without putting you in risk, needing to go ask someone else, then yes, you should do that. You should definitely do that if it's possible to do. Now, if it will put you in financial stress, really not financial, it's not that you won't be able to go out to lunch for a few days, but if it really puts you in a financial stress where you're missing bills, then you're not able to be able to provide that at that time. You may be able to provide in some other ways, but you may not be able to help financially. Now, once you become a husband, your household is primarily talking about you, your wife, and any kids that you may have, or anyone else that is in your household at the time. For example, if my mother comes and stays with us, she decides she doesn't want to live in her own house anymore, she sells it, and she wants to come and stay in our house, and my wife agrees to it, then my mother would become part of my household. If when I adopted one of my nephews for a time, he became part of my household. So I'm responsible for taking care of him because he is part of my household. Now, friends, I always caution, when you're dealing with friends, be very careful. Know who your friends are. Money can ruin friendship quicker than anything. So be very, very careful with that. Now, another verse that comes to mind is in Ephesians chapter 5. Now, the Apostle Paul is talking and giving instructions to husband and wives. And in verses 28 through 29, after he kind of gives some instructions to the husband on how they should be, one of those instructions is this, starting in verse 28. It says, in the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does for the church. Now, to me, that makes it plain and clear on the roles of husbands within a family and relationship. They're to be the provider, the provider for food and caring. To me, that includes shelter. That's providing all the things that are needed. Now, that doesn't mean, Birkin bags and, shopping sprees at Tiffany. If you're not able to do that, then no, that doesn't mean that. But it means that you're able to provide the roof over the head, food, utilities, the things that your family needs in order to be able to move and operate in this world. Now, with that being said, it doesn't mean that men should not strive for more, and we'll talk about being competitive in this world. But you should not make the providing financially the only thing that you're focused on. And I've seen way too many men, and I personally had to struggle with, especially starting off early in my career, where I focused on climbing the ladder. And I can tell you, and that's something we'll talk about when we talk about being competitive, it's something that we as men, I think I know it's something that we as men do naturally. It's something that comes naturally to us. And I do believe it's because of the testosterone. We're competitive. We have a drive to compete. And we'll talk about how competition affects men as part of our Classic Men series. But being a provider is what men were made to be. Now, again, it doesn't mean just financially. There are other ways that you provide for your family, right? Husbands, I we'll talk about this more when we talk about relationships, particularly when it comes to marriage and the females and ladies. Husbands, I believe, are to provide a safe space for their wives, a way for your wives to be able to have a safe person, a safe confidant to come to, someone that they can feel vulnerable in front of and to feel protected and not feel like they're going to get bashed down and beaten down. And I believe that should be the same way for your children. They should be able to have a safe space with you as their father to be able to provide guidance to them. Now, it doesn't mean that you're always going to provide the answers that they want to hear, but they should know that you love them and you're going to provide or give them the things that they need to be able to operate and move successfully in this world. So we'll definitely talk about that a little more. But those are a couple of Bible verses that we as men need to keep in mind as we move and operate and start thinking about what it is that we're supposed to be providing. Whether the 50-50 lifestyle, again, I don't think the Bible endorses that anywhere. I have no Bible verses that I've seen where that is endorsed. As far as men being provider, I've given you a couple where the Bible seems to lean towards that idea of men being providers, being those who take care of their family, being the primary protector and provider for their family. All right, guys. Again, this is another Christian male perspective. Check out the comments down below. Please leave one. Any studies that I talked about are linked at the bottom below as well. Catch you later, guys. Stay sharp. Thank you for watching today's video. Please like it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can follow us on social media at A Christian Male Perspective. Stay sharp, fellas.